in. So I want to welcome everybody and say thank you for watching tonight. Welcome to the Gospel Truth. We are at Preterist Central, deep in the bowels of Preterist Central, broadcasting our message to the world, or at least anyone who's willing to watch. And we do not wear Guy Fawkes masks, right? That's what they wore in V.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So we're actually.
I don't think I've ever seen the movie.
Oh really? Yeah. You need to watch it. You need. It's actually pretty good.
Is it?
Yeah. It make you feel really insecure about their government and everything.
I already do.
Yeah. Well. Yeah. It make it even worse. Okay. So we are gonna get let everybody join in here. Looks like it's going to be a pretty good program tonight, so we're thankful that we're going to have. Hopefully, it all works out here in just a moment. I just went blank. I hate when I do that. I get so much going through my head. Norm Fields, yeah, I'm sorry about that, Norm. I know you're probably watching, so I apologize about that. But if you're watching on Facebook, we're also on YouTube at Restoration Movement 2.0. So you've got an opportunity there to check us out and see what's up with that kind of deal. So and it's actually easier to find that. It's archived a little better on YouTube than it ever is on Facebook. But either way, so there you go. I want to say hey to several people. It looks like Brent Bishel has joined us, and we're thankful for him. He's a faithful gospel preacher out there in California, and I just went blank. See, Norm, it's not just you; it's me too. It's everybody else. Where's he at? Where did we go? It's in California. Why can't I remember this? It'll come to me in a minute. See, here's what happens with me. I shove all this information in my head during the day. Then when I want to try to get something else out, the other stuff's in the way. So that's what's going on. We got James Boswell has been a long time watcher. We're very thankful that you're here. We see Annette with us, Matthew Ogles, and Nikki. Hey, Nikki, good to see you. And lots of other people. My wife, my beautiful, lovely wife, whom I am eternally grateful for, is watching. Good preacher Bill Evans here in our locality in Indianapolis is watching with us tonight. We're thankful for that. And so many others, I can't even count them. But I do have to mention the infamous Scott Claff is with us. So kudos to Scott Claff. There you go. And so many others. So I want to thank
we
you.
were infamous.
Oh, Scott. No, we're infamous.
Oh, infamous.
Infamous.
Okay.
You got to watch Three Amigos if you're going to understand some of these references. Scott says it was Springville. So actually traveled there. And one last, I'm going to say a hey to that I see here real quick is Marjorie Dots, and we are so thankful that you're watching here tonight. So if you have questions, send those questions to us. You can send them to Facebook through my Facebook at John Watson. Just do it through Messenger, and I'll do my very dead level best to check those questions out.
Yeah, don't send them to me because I don't have a Facebook.
Trent did the smart thing and got rid of it. Also, if that doesn't work, this is a lot slower, but I check about once every couple weeks. That's about all I can get to it. Is my email address at wfas@sbcglobal.net. So you can certainly do that. And if you really wanted to snail mail us, you can mail it to the church building at 2675 Kentucky Avenue, Indianapolis, Indiana 46221. It's been a while since we went all over all that information, so I thought it might be a good idea to do that tonight. And obviously that's where we worship the Lord, and that's the West Side Church of Christ. All right. So essentially, let me kind of build this up here.
Let me ask you a question.
All right.
So you said you're eternally grateful for your wife. So in the resurrection, is she going to be your wife?
No. No, she's not. Does that mean she's not my wife now?
I didn't say that.
We'll figure it out. Either way, it's going to be the way God wants it to be. Yeah, that's the simplest way to put it.
It's just an inside joke. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Uh-oh. I better say hey to my daughter-in-law, Ariel. Hey, I don't want to get in trouble. Okay, so essentially what we're doing, and you saw the title that Norm Fields is going to be with us tonight. So we are going to give him a call and um, and talk with him. Norm has had. Let me try to get all this going here. Speaker. Let's try it.
I'm not sure. Okay, can you hear me?
We're trying to get all connected here.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm actually streaming right now, and I've got you on speakerphone. If that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. That's what
Okay.
that's all I'm doing. Norm, I might have to try. I might try to have to reconnect if I lose you here. So let's try this
I
again.
can very good volume.
Oh, there it is. You had it.
Okay, well, just whatever you need to do.
I need this.
Powering off.
Hang with me just a minute here, and
Okay.
otherwise, if I do this just on speaker,
Powering on. You are now paired. Enjoy.
In the live chat,
There we go. We got it.
How well you can hear here.
okay, we have got it. Are you there with us?
Yeah, I can hear you. I'm wanting to get some feedback from my viewers to see if they can hear you okay.
Okay.
So hopefully somebody will jump in the live chat here in just a second and let me know whether or not they can hear you. But I can hear you fine, so you can go ahead.
Okay. Well, if they have difficulty, we get a pretty good stream through, and this works out pretty good through my Facebook page at John Watson, and also Restoration Movement 2.0. If that helps them any. Okay.
On YouTube.
Yeah, that's on YouTube. Sorry about that. Okay. So hey, Norm, I do appreciate this, and it's very gracious of you to accept the offer from earlier today. So I appreciate that like crazy. Just a few things before we get started, because I have to say a couple of these things. I've never met you physically. Matter of fact, I've never even spoken to you until just now. So
Right.
So I appreciate that a lot. I really do. I can't say that enough, because I think that you and I are on the same page as far as trying to get to the bottom of the truth. So that's a good thing. So just so everybody understands, and so I can figure this out. Now, you are a preacher in the Church of Christ. That is correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I've been preaching since 1996.
96.
Ah, congratulations.
Yeah, that's a long time. About the same time I started full time anyway. So I was in 95. October of 95 was when I became official. So yeah, it's been a good journey. I'm thankful for what the Lord's done. And okay, so now let me ask you this, because I don't know if anyone else cares about this or if it makes much of a difference. So how would you categorize your, for lack of a better word, segment of the Church of Christ? Would you be part of the antis or mainstream, or you get where I'm going with that? I know most preachers go, I'm just faithful, but that's kind of my answer too.
Well, I think that would be my response to that comment. Is that I don't practice sectarian Christianity. I just teach and preach what the Bible says, and how people label that. They're free to label it however they want to.
Okay.
But I mean, if you mean do we eat in the building? Well, yeah. Like I've said many times, and you can probably tell from looking at me, I'll eat wherever you put a plate in front of me.
Alrighty. Okay. So cooperation is on
I
the plate.
would say me, myself, my personality, the way I would describe myself, I guess, would be the way to approach that. I would say I'm either very conservative or ultra conservative.
The funny thing is, I don't think I've ever talked to a preacher who has said otherwise. They're always yeah, I'm very conservative. But
Right.
okay, so I get where you're coming from. Then okay, so classrooms, or not, sorry, there are churches of Christ that do not have anything to do with any kind of teaching, classrooms or anything like that. It's just a worship
Sure.
service. Yeah.
And I think a lot of those things are matters of congregational autonomy.
Amen.
The organization of the church is autonomous, of course,
I
and
agree with that.
autonomous congregations can decide to organize their teaching program or their fellowship activities or their benevolent work however they choose within the scope of Scripture on an autonomous level.
Yeah.
So I don't really draw lines and make distinctions like that. You know, if it's a liberal congregation that is such that you can't worship faithfully or serve God faithfully in that congregation, then that's where I would draw the line, or the opposite extreme, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, got you there. Okay, so then we're just kind of covering some ground here, so we all know where each other's coming from. Then you've got you obviously you've been baptized into Christ, immersed for the remission of sins, so on and so forth. I know,
right.
I know that's redundant.
I have been, as Paul puts it, in Romans chapter 6, verses 3 and 4, I have died, been buried, and been raised from the dead. Yes.
Okay. All right.
Excellent.
Yeah. So in that.
We'll just preempt part of our discussion there.
Okay. All right. So from that vein, I would call you a brother. I would consider you a brother. And okay. I have lots of brothers that I don't agree with on certain things, but I think there's a core values and things that make us brothers. That's Acts chapter 2 and verse 47 to me anyway. So and not that I intend to talk about that the whole time, but there are things that we as members in the Church of Christ vary on, and I'll say just a little bit of my background. I would be categorized as an anti. That's how I was raised. So not that I ever really bought into that. I saw a lot of faults with that, but anyway, that's my background. I held the traditional future return of Christ belief up until about 2 years ago. So this is kind of new for me. The eschatology thing. A lot of people call it different things: AD 70, covenant eschatology, realized eschatology. I just simply call it Bible truth. But if I was going to be a little more specific, I would call it fulfilled Bible prophecy. And I think that's very descriptive. And covenant eschatology, I think, is fair enough. But anyway, I like fulfilled Bible prophecy. And for those who are listening that don't get what I'm saying, because I'm pretty sure you're pretty familiar with that, Norm, aren't you?
Yes, I know exactly where you're coming from. Yeah.
Okay, so if anyone is watching, what this that doesn't understand this, what this means from my position is that I believe Jesus taught that he was going to come within the lifetime of the first century generation. I would quote Matthew 16, 27 to 28. The Son of Man is about to come in the glory of his Father with his angels, and will then repay every man according to his deeds. And truly I say to you, there are some of those who are standing here who will not taste death until they see the Son of Man coming in heaven. So that's just a little taste for our watchers about those things that are.
Well, that would be a passage dealing with the destruction of Jerusalem, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I would agree with you on that.
Really? I'm rather surprised
that when he said that you will not see you will not see death until you see the Son of Man coming in power.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Well, where were you quoting from? Give me the passage again.
Matthew 16, 27 and 28.
Matthew 16, 27 and 28. Let me just be sure we're thinking about the same thing here.
Okay.
Matthew 16, 27 and 28.
You might have been thinking about Matthew 24.
Right. Yeah, that's right. For the Son of Man will come in the glory of his Father with his angels, and then he will reward each one according to his work. So, well, yeah, obviously that's not the same context.
Okay, I was going to say, because if you agree with that's the destruction of Jerusalem, we're done pretty much. So,
right, yeah. Assuredly, I say to you, there are some standing here who shall not taste death till they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom. Now, that's verse 28 is parallel with Mark chapter 9, right? Or
8 and 9.
Yeah, 8:38 and 9:1.
yeah, 9:1. Assuredly, I say to you that there are some standing here who will not taste death till they see the kingdom of God present with power. Yeah, that's Acts chapter 2, the establishment of the church, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Well,
All right.
well,
Yeah,
well, wait a minute. Acts,
we agree that he's talking there about the establishment of his church.
Yeah.
He's
No.
not talking about the destruction of Jerusalem in that.
I answered too hastily, or in my own head, I answered it right. But so let me put it in words. Acts 2 is the establishment of the church, no question about that. Peter quotes Joel, but this 27 and 28 of Matthew 16 and Mark's version of it is talking about the return of the Lord, the second coming of the Lord.
Okay, well then we would disagree on that.
I kind of figured that. Yeah.
Okay. Now, well, you go ahead. This is your program, so you go ahead.
Okay. Well, I want to hear what you have to say. So, and I want to say this right off the bat. I'm not trying to trick anybody. I just want honest answers from honest people, and most of the time I get that. So, so that I'm thankful for. So I just thought I would say that. Okay. So in Matthew 16, 27, 28, Jesus clearly says that he will come back and there'll be some standing there who will not taste death until they see his return. How would you,
is that what he said?
how would you say that? Well, I'm kind of paraphrasing. I can quote it. Truly I say to you, there are some of those who are standing here who will not taste death until they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom.
Okay, so the word again, you added the word again. The word again is not in the text.
Well, I just read it. I may have said that paraphrasing it, but I just quoted
For
it.
the Son of Man will come in the glory of his Father
Mhm.
with his angels, and then he will reward each according to his works. Assuredly, I say to you, there are some standing here who shall not taste death till they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom.
Right.
So the word again is not there.
Well, okay, so I just read it. I mean, are we going to quibble over that? I'm not. So, I mean, I was telling you how
make sure you're not adding words to the text.
I was telling you how I see it by explaining it that way, and then read it.
Okay.
Okay, so I see this as the again coming, okay, or the second coming of Jesus, and he said he would do that in their lifetime, and there would be some standing there who would see that take place. Not all, but some. So that's kind of where I'm at with it. What do you think?
Well, I would want to go back to verse 24 and read the whole paragraph.
Okay.
Where it says, then Jesus said to his disciples, if anyone desires to come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. Well, that would be the trick of the Christian life, right?
Sure.
To be his disciple, that's kind of the kind of life we have to live in following him.
Yeah, I have no problem with that.
For whoever desires to save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. So that's conversion to him, right?
Sure.
Isn't that right?
Yeah. I'm sorry if you couldn't hear that.
Isn't he talking about being converted to him?
Yes, absolutely. This is, I have no problem with this up to this point.
Okay. For what profit is it to a man if he gains the whole world and loses his own soul? Or what will a man give in exchange for his soul? So, talking about being converted to him, denying self to live his life instead of ours, right? That's crucifying ourselves with him, right? Taking up our cross daily and following him. We're striving to live his life instead of ours.
I can go along with that.
We do that, and we do that in his church, right?
Sure, absolutely.
Would you agree with that? We do that in his church.
Yeah, absolutely. As a matter of fact, he just said that in verse 18. Just saying. Yeah.
Okay, so So there's nothing in this world worth forfeiting that connection with Him and the salvation that He provides, right? What will a man give in exchange for his soul? For the Son of Man will come in the glory of His Father with His angels, and then He will reward each according to his works. So that's the reward for living the Christian life, right? For living that life of self-denial, for living the lifestyle of Christ.
Well, not only that, he asked, what would you give for your soul?
Exchange for your soul.
For your soul.
That's judgment.
So those people who do not take up their cross for Christ, they exchange their soul for the world. Because he asked, well, what does it profit a man that he gain the whole world and lose his soul? So we're not only talking about the church, we're talking about those who are not in the church.
Wait a minute, how many people are talking?
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead and explain.
I'm sorry, either more people are talking or you're breaking up or something.
Oh, well, there's just two of us. Trent does the show with me every week, so it's just the two of us. So we may have a bad connection. If it gets bad and you can't hear, let me know. So because I can't tell on this
If
end.
you rather not speak, then I will.
No.
To go on there, the flow of the context is living the Christian life. And by living the Christian life, when Christ comes to reward those who have lived the Christian life, he will reward them.
But
they will receive a reward.
Yeah, but you're leaving out the part.
That reward will be received in His kingdom that would come in their lifetime, that they would see coming. And again, Mark chapter 9 and verse 1 makes that clear. And Luke 24, he's carrying Jerusalem till you are endued with power from on high. You'll see the kingdom of God come with power. Acts chapter 2, the kingdom of God came with power. So,
okay, so here's what you've left out, brother. You've got verse 26. For what will it profit a man if he gains the whole world and forfeits his own soul? So we have to understand here, he's saying you're going to have people who are saved and people who are lost, or they're judged. And when is this going to take place? What will a man give in exchange for his soul? And then he says in verse 27, this is the flow of it. For the Son of Man is about to, in the original language, most of our translations do not get this right, but it says, the Son of Man, in my version, New American Standard 95, is going to come in the glory of His Father with His angels. But the literal is about to, the word mellow. And this flows very well. So he says the Son of a Man is about to come in the glory of His Father with His angels, and will then repay every man according to his deeds. So there's would you agree that when Jesus comes with His angels, so He comes with His angels, and will repay every man according to his deeds? Isn't that Judgment Day? Isn't that when judgment and resurrection take place? Is when the Lord comes again, His parousia.
Who is every man?
The just and the unjust.
You said the word will there. For the Son of Man will come in the glory of His Father. That means about to. I was just looking up that word.
So
that it means about to.
Yeah, let me show you this, or read it from mine, New American Standard Bible,
Yeah.
right? Okay, so for the Son of Man is going to come, okay, in the glory of His Father. So my contention is, my contention is that's not a good
third person.
That's not a good translation, because it's the word mellow, which should be about to.
Why should it be about to instead of is going to?
Well, either way you can arrive at the same conclusion, but the term mellow.
Well, about to and is going to are very different. So if it
not
must
really
be
not if you keep it in context,
then okay. But why must it be about to? Because that fits with your preconceived notion of the word, or because the Greek grammar necessitates it to be about to? Because I'm looking at it, Milo, in the context, it is atu mita ton agolon, atu, and so where is Mila? Let me back. Okay, miligar, o, weos, right? So what is it about the Greek syntax there that necessitates it to be the way that you want it to be about to? When I'm looking at it, and it's a present active indicative third person verb.
There you go. Present active indicative. That puts it at that time. And matter of fact, you put all of this at that time just a moment ago when you said that this was people being saved in the church. So you weren't putting that in a future aspect. You were putting it in a past, a preterist viewpoint on that subject of salvation.
Because
so this is something that was past.
That's what the word
from our
means,
standpoint.
I'm looking at it right here. It means is going to.
Let's get back to the original
Yeah.
argument.
So, but either way, here's what you've got there. And it doesn't matter what the translation you use. It should be is about to. Okay.
Okay.
But
based on your
but you gave us the present indicative active.
Based on what you already believe before you go to the passage, you say it has to mean about to.
Well, it's no different than what you would believe before you go to the passage.
Does not necessitate about to.
Well,
so the only way that you would come to that conclusion that it means about to is because that's what you already believe before you read the passage. Right?
That would be the exact same way you would approach it, right? You already believe the Lord's coming in our future, which, by the way, is not soon or at hand.
I don't put a time frame on it because he didn't put a time frame on it.
Actually,
now, when you go
I would disagree with that.
The next verse, when you go to the next verse in verse 28, in accordance with the context, it says, "For what profit is it to a man if he gains the whole world and loses his own soul? Or what will a man give in exchange for his soul? For the Son of Man will come, is going to come, and that's a fact. He is going to come, right?
No.
Will come in the glory of his Father with his angels, and then he will reward each according to his work. Assuredly, I say to you, there are some standing here who shall not taste death till they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom." In the kingdom, there's the church.
Yeah, when did that happen?
Pardon me?
When did that happen? Is that yet in our future? How do you divorce those two passages?
That happened in Acts chapter 2. And so
I agree with that.
I
know it's a past event.
The reward that he would bring when he comes is for those who are in the church. For those who are living the kind of life that he referred to in verses 24 and 25. That's who's going to be rewarded when he comes.
No.
Those who are in his kingdom, that they would see established in their lifetime. So
here's what you've done.
The verse doesn't present any.
Hang on. Let me get a word in here. So here's what I believe you've done. You're saying that they're saved in the first century and lost somewhere in the future.
No, I didn't say that.
This is what it sounds like to me.
How does it sound that way?
Because you're trying to
What will you give in exchange?
Well, wait a minute. You asked me a question. Let me answer.
There's nothing worth exchanging our soul for, because Christ is going to come to reward those who
Norm.
So there's nothing worth exchanging that for.
Hello. Hey, Norm. You asked me a question. Let me answer it. Okay. So
yeah, I'm listening.
So I'm not sure if I remember the question now. The entire context, 24 through 26, do you agree is talking about events taking place in the first century?
I'm sorry, I wasn't able to understand everything you said.
All right, apologize. I'll try it again. The entire context from verse 24 through 26 is to take place in the first century.
Before
no.
People saved and lost in the first century. What would a man give in exchange for his soul in the first century?
Well, that's any time ever. Yeah, sure.
Okay,
I mean,
so
I don't know why you're making 26 refer to people that were saved and lost at that time, when what it is an exhortation to be faithful.
who was he talking to?
Right? There's nothing worth exchanging your soul for.
Exactly.
So be faithful.
Who was
that's the
Jesus talking
exhortation.
to? Who was Jesus talking to?
What the context is, there's going to be a
Then it says
judgment.
in verse 24, then Jesus said to his
Context is
disciples,
a judgment.
When did they live?
pardon me?
When did they live? When did they die?
Well, I don't know when they died, but they were obviously alive when Jesus said that. He wasn't talking to dead disciples.
So that would have been in the 1st century?
Well, obviously, yes.
Okay. So he tells them these things are getting ready to take place. There's some standing here. So this sets the context for Mello. There are some standing here who will not die until they see, essentially paraphrasing, these events take place. The kingdom coming. The kingdom comes with power and great glory. It's coming with Jesus on the clouds with his angels for judgment. That's Daniel chapter 12.
Now, see,
Very easy.
You're adding all kinds of stuff to verse 28. That's not in verse 28.
Well, explain how you can divorce 27 and 28.
I'm not divorcing anything. I'm staying with the flow of the context.
So the context
if anyone
is,
desires to come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. So whoever desires to save his life will lose it.
So the people in the 1st century,
we have to live in Christ.
The people in the 1st century are going,
right?
He's talking to people 2,000 years from now.
For my sake, will find.
Hang on.
Right? So that's talking about the Christian lifestyle.
Well, you've said all that already, so we don't need to go back over it. But Norm, hey brother, can you listen for a moment? I appreciate that.
I thought you asked me a question and wanted me to answer your question. Go ahead.
Well, you've said the same thing 5 times easily, but you're not answering my question. How is this? Who would?
You said I divorced.
Norm, let me ask the question.
So I was showing the flow of the context, but I didn't divorce 28 and 27.
Okay, fair enough, but he still says in verse 27, these things are going to happen in the lifetime of these people. In 28. In verse 27, he says they are about to happen, present, active, indicative. You can't get Mello out of the
You're
first
wrong. He doesn't say it's about to happen. What English translation are you reading that translates that about to happen?
Young's literal.
When he says that the Son of Man, now you say,
did you hear that, brother?
The Son of Man is about to come.
The Young's literal translates it about to. The interlinear.
Verse 27 is talking about what will be received by those who live faithfully, who live that life of self-denial. It doesn't say when they will receive it.
That's a stretch.
And then he says in verse 28 that life of self-denial is lived in his kingdom that was about to be established. Right? So that's how I'm not divorcing the flow of the context.
Okay, so let's ask you, when is Jesus, okay, what is verse 28? What's the time frame of verse 28?
I paralleled it with Mark 9:1 and the statement that Jesus told the apostles to wait in Jerusalem till they receive power, and he said, "You'll see the kingdom of God come with power."
So this is
the
Pentecost.
Power came in Acts chapter 2, verses 1 through 4, with the giving of the Holy Spirit, which he referred to in Acts chapter 1. So obviously, that's the fulfillment of what he's talking about in verse 28, is the establishment of the church.
Is it Pentecost?
And so
yes or no?
And so the connection to the context is that the faithful life that he requires would be lived in his church.
So we just totally skip over verse 27.
He's going to reward is those who are in his church.
Okay, now listen to this before you say anything. Okay, here's what I think you've done: 24 through 26 and 28 are all talking about the same thing. And in the very middle of this, Jesus changes subjects to something totally different. Is that what you're saying?
No.
That's what it sounds like to me.
And I've explained the flow of the context, my view of the flow of the context, like you said, 5 times, but you keep asking me to explain it. So,
well, just say ditto or something like that. Okay, so let me throw more context into this. All right, because Jesus.
When did he come?
Well, go ahead. I'm going to let Trent here.
when did he come in the glory in his kingdom? Are you saying that's Pentecost?
I mean, do you want to spend the whole hour on this one passage, or do you want to say that, we disagree on this passage and move on to something else?
Oh, we can. That's fine. So what I'd like to move on to is Matthew chapter 10. But I will say this real quick. Jesus said, "You will see me." Did they see him? Is that metaphorical? Is that figurative or literal, or what is it?
Well, again, I'm not sure what you're referring to when you say, did they see him? Did they see him when?
Matthew 16, verse 28. Did they see him?
They see the Son of Man coming.
In the establishment of the church, did they see him?
Yeah.
Well, they saw his work. Yeah, of course.
Okay.
Such perception.
That's good. I'll bank that for now. Okay, so Matthew chapter 10. This is still along the same topic. So Matthew chapter 10, Jesus says in verse verse 23. We'll just start there. He says, so Matthew 10, 23. Whenever they persecute you in one city, flee to the next. For truly I say to you, you will not finish going through the cities of Israel until the Son of Man comes. What do you make of that?
Matthew 10.
Verse 23.
Give me the verse again. I'm sorry, I was dealing with my screen.
Oh, that's okay. Yeah, verse 23.
It goes back.
Matthew 10, 23.
Correct. Oh, we completely off here. Yeah, I gotta reset that.
And you will be hated by all for my name's sake, but he who endures to the end will be saved. When they persecute you in this city, flee to another. For assuredly I say to you, you will not have gone through the cities of Israel before the Son of Man comes.
It's okay.
Well, based on,
take your time.
Comparing that with Matthew chapter 24, that would seem to be referring to the establishment of the church, because in Matthew chapter 24, he said before the destruction of Jerusalem, the gospel would have been preached to the whole world. Matthew chapter 24, verse 14. So that can't be referring to the destruction of Jerusalem, because they hadn't gone through all of Israel yet, which they didn't do before Acts chapter 2 with the establishment of the church. That's where it began to spread from Jerusalem. So it seems like now, I haven't, dug into it specifically on this issue to answer this question. So, just off the top of my head, paralleling that to other passages, this would have to be before the destruction of Jerusalem, because in 64, in Colossians 1:23, the Apostle Paul said that the gospel had been preached to every creature under heaven.
That's
which
right.
Jesus said would have happened before the destruction of Jerusalem in Matthew chapter 24 and verse 14. So this has to be prior to that.
Okay.
Because it says, let's see, verse 23, when they persecute you in this city, it was verse 23, right?
Yes, verse 23.
And I say to you, you will not have gone through the cities of Israel before the Son of Man comes. So that would have to be referring to Acts chapter 2, not the destruction of Jerusalem. Otherwise, you've got a contradiction between this passage and Matthew chapter 24, verse 14. Right?
Okay. So let me get this straight. You're saying that Jesus came at Pentecost.
The church.
In a sense of his working, yes. Not in a literal coming. No, not like in the second coming that refers to when he's going to come back and end all things. That everything's going to come to an end.
So Jesus had
not in a literal thing like that.
Jesus had a coming at Pentecost.
Sure.
How did he come?
Isn't that what he told the apostles in John chapter 14, 15, and 16? All those times he told them he was going to send the Holy Spirit to him. That was
the Holy Spirit. Matter of fact, he says I was just getting ready to go there.
Says that it would be. hang on a second.
Go ahead.
Sometimes he says,
You got it?
sometimes he says that, you ready?
Yeah.
Okay. Sometimes he says that it would be him that would send the Holy Spirit. Sometimes he says that he would petition the Father to send the Holy Spirit. Well, which one was it? Did he send the Holy Spirit, or did he petition the Father to send the Holy Spirit? And the Holy Spirit was coming to bring to them what was his. He says he would not speak on his own authority, but what he hears, and he would speak of me, and he will glorify me, Jesus said. So it doesn't seem like a stretch to me to say that he could use that same kind of language and say that was a coming on his part. Yes.
Okay. But he doesn't say that. Now you had your shot here. Give me a second.
That a little bit and say if you're making
You're the one
Matthew
struggling.
chapter 10 and verse 23 the destruction of Jerusalem, which it sounds like you are, then how does that not create a contradiction with Matthew 24 and verse 14?
It doesn't at all. They're the same thing. They're exactly the same thing.
Okay, well, explain to me how you will not have gone through the cities of Israel before the Son of Man comes is exactly the same thing as saying that before he comes, they would have preached the gospel to the whole world. That this gospel will be preached to the whole world.
Okay.
How is that exactly the same thing?
Let me exegete this for you, brother. Okay, so here's what Jesus says. Many times during his lifetime, or I'm sorry, his ministry with his apostles, they would talk about these events. Matthew 24 was not the first time that he ever spoke with them about his parousia, and they asked about that, verse 3 in Matthew chapter 24. So what we have to understand is the context of Jesus's ministry is the synoptic gospels without question. So
you're not answering my question.
I am answering your question. You just don't like it. Give me a minute. This is called exegesis.
No.
Okay.
Let me be more specific with my question. Okay?
No, let me finish answering this one, and then you can ask that one. So keep it in mind.
Matthew chapter 10 and verse 23 and Matthew chapter 24 and verse 14 are both referring
to the same event.
That it doesn't create a contradiction. How do they not contradict if they're both referring to the same thing?
Because they're the same event. Okay, so Jesus tells them, "You will not finish." Listen
to the answer. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so I'm going to need you to be silent for just a moment, and then I'll tell you when you can talk. Okay, just out of fairness.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so let me finish the answer. Jesus tells them in Matthew 10 that you're going to have this persecution following you from city to city, and you won't even finish going through these cities until the Son of Man comes. Okay, I'm going to leave the language there. That's exactly what Jesus said. In Matthew 24, matter of fact, let's go over here and check it out. Verse 14, Jesus said, "This gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in the whole world as a testimony to all the nations, and then the end will come." So what were they doing? They were going through these cities. They were preaching to the nations. They were preaching to their brethren. They were preaching to the Jewish people about the Messiah. And they were being persecuted. This is that persecution that Jesus said in Matthew chapter 23 was coming. Verse 34, "Behold, I'm sending you prophets and wise men and scribes, and some of them you will kill and crucify." This is Matthew 10. This is what he was warning them about. And he says, "I'm sending them to you, and you're going to kill them. You're going to scourge them in your synagogues and persecute from" what? City to city. So when is this time frame? Look at verse 36. I'm trying to condense this just for time. "Truly I say to you, all these things will come upon this generation." And then in verse 3, they say, "Well, when is this going to happen?" And Jesus says, again, "Remember, I told you, you wouldn't finish going through the cities of Israel until these things take place." Now, there you go.
Then those disciples there, were there other disciples teaching later on? Paul went to the Gentiles. This is for right here in verse 17 and 18 of Matthew 10. "And beware of men, for they will deliver you up to the councils, and they will scourge you in their synagogues, and you shall be brought before governors, kings, for my sake, for a testimony against them and the Gentiles."
That's right. So this situation is squarely placed in the first century. And
these disciples with him at that time were consigned to teach the Jews, but there were others who were consigned to teach the Gentiles.
That's right. So hey, brother, out of curiosity, do you hold the position, as most of our brethren do, that the first 34 verses of Matthew 24 are speaking about the destruction of Jerusalem?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Just for clarification. Okay. So he says that the end will come at the destruction of Jerusalem.
Yes.
Okay.
The end of Judaism. Yes.
Okay. Well, I agree with that.
That's the question he was answering when they said, when will these things be? He had just told them that the temple was going to be destroyed. And so they asked, when will these things be? And he told them, and he told them what to look for.
He is so close.
That's why Josephus said that not a single Christian died in the destruction of Jerusalem.
Hey,
because they knew what to look for and they got out of the city.
You want to know something funny, as far as the way I see it anyway? We're not so far apart. You're closer than you might think to a full preterist view.
Now, let me just say this.
Okay.
I fully recognize that AD 70 is an extremely important date in Scripture as a world event that would affect worldwide affairs. No question.
Bless you, brother.
Yeah, good for you.
My personal opinion is that AD 70 was the point of the transition period between the gospel and
You're kidding.
Judaism would come to its completion.
Wow.
That transition period would be over at AD 70. That's the time. If you ask the question, does the Bible talk about any time
That's awesome.
that would be the definite line when Judaism, the transition between Judaism and Christianity would be definite? It's AD 70, no question.
Yeah, Hebrews.
Hebrews 9. I personally believe that AD 70, all Scripture was completed prior to AD 70. I believe the latest New Testament book written was written about 68, and that the New Testament was finished and in the hands of the church, been circulated throughout the church and in the hands of the church prior to the destruction of Jerusalem in 87.
Wow.
I'm convinced of that through my study.
Great. That's fantastic.
That is a far cry, a very far cry from saying that we're in agreement on the 87.
Well, I get that. Yeah, I get that. But just to hear you say that, most of our brethren would not. Matter of fact, you might get some heat for putting that out there, because you know.
Who I get heat from or don't get heat from doesn't matter to me. What matters is
good.
You know, the truth. All I care about is that I'm in agreement with what the Scripture says.
Amen. That's where I'm at.
Excellent.
That's exactly where I'm at. And another one of the reasons that I'm in that is because of verses 29 to 31 in Matthew chapter 24. Jesus clearly uses the same language that he used in Matthew 16, 27 and 28. Listen to this. He says, then will appear, this is verse 30 of Matthew 24, then will appear the sign of the Son of Man in the sky, and the tribes of the earth will mourn. They will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of the sky with power and great glory, and he will send forth his angels with a great trumpet, and they will gather together his elect from the four winds, from one end of the sky to the other. And man, when I started seeing that and plugging it into audience relevance, and realizing this was written to people who, standing 3 or 4 feet away from him, would go, I'm going to see these things. This is me. I have to tell myself Jesus was not deceiving them. He was just simply telling them what was going to happen. And he said, my parousia will happen at the destruction of Jerusalem. Do you understand what parousia is?
Yes.
Okay, I'm not trying to be condescending.
I understand.
Yeah, okay. You know,
I mean, I just read from the Greek New Testament to you, but yeah, I
okay, that's good. You're a step ahead of me then. Okay, so he uses the term parousia because the apostles use the term parousia in verse 3. What is parousia to you? What do you think it means?
It's a term that well, the definition of it, literal definition, if you want to use that term, literal definition, is appearing.
Okay.
Or
It means presence.
parousia. Are you saying parousia?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm a Hoosier, a parousia. So
It's
parousia, however you want to
Okay.
say it.
I thought that you were saying parousia. I just wanted to make sure.
Perusia, whatever. But just for clarification, Strong's number 3952, and the definition is a presence, a coming. That's the short definition, arrival or advent. But the definition, without going into the expanded version of it, is presence, a coming, an arrival, advent, especially of the second coming of Christ. So Strong's, and I know the others, define it pretty much the same way. So would you disagree with that definition?
That it means appearing?
Appearing, or the advent or second coming of Christ?
Yes, it is used in reference to the second coming of Christ, and it's used in reference to a lot of other stuff too.
Yes. Yes, it is.
Give me a passage where you're looking at it from.
Parousia, Matthew 24 and verse 3.
24:3.
What are they talking about there? What parousia?
In verse 3.
Yes.
And as he sat on the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him privately, saying, "Tell us, when will these things be, and what will be the sign of your coming?"
Mm-hmm.
Well, there, I would say they didn't have a right understanding of what it was they were asking at that point, because even right up until Acts chapter 1, they still didn't have a full grasp on what it was Jesus was teaching about the coming of his kingdom and about his coming and about the judgment on Jerusalem and all of these things. It's obvious all the way up to Acts chapter 1 that they didn't have a clear understanding of that. But after Acts chapter 2, when they received the Holy Spirit there in Acts chapter 2, they never, obviously, they never expressed any more confusion on that issue.
Okay, so here's what I would.
They were asking here. They were asking about. I would say, trying to get into the mind of the disciples at this point in their understanding, they were probably using that term in reference to his being like a Davidic king restoring national Israel. That they struggled with that idea, and Jesus, taught on it many times.
Okay.
And even after all that Jesus said about it, they still didn't fully understand what he was teaching, as they expressed there in Acts chapter 1. Is it at this time that you'll restore the kingdom to Israel? So obviously they still didn't understand it completely. So what were they asking at this point? Well, I would have to get in their mind to
that's our point.
That. Probably their understanding of it at that point was, what will be the sign when you're ready to take back the kingdom like David did?
Okay, so let me make a little bit of commentary on your answer. Okay, I believe that they did know what they were talking about, and Jesus says so in Matthew chapter 13. If you read the context, we know what this is talking about, the harvest, and he explains all of these things, and he talks about the judgment. This is eschatology, the same topic we're talking about. So in verse 51, Jesus says, "Have you understood all these things?" They said to him, "Yes." And Jesus said to them, "Therefore, every scribe and disciple who has become a disciple of the kingdom of heaven is like a head of household who brings out the treasure of things new and old." So he's talking about these prophecies being fulfilled, and he says, "Do you understand this?" And they say yes, and he does not refute them. He accepts their answer. I would say that in Acts 1, when they asked the question, they were wondering about them restoring the kingdom to Israel. I think that's a lot deeper.
Taking it from the room.
Yeah, I think it's a lot deeper than looking at it in a physical sense, because they would have understood Ezekiel 37 about it being the resurrection, being the whole house of Israel. So I think their answer, or I'm sorry, their question was based on that. And Jesus says it's not for you to understand the times and the epochs, times and the seasons. But the funny thing about this is Paul, and I'm sure the other apostles were on board with this based on their being guided by the Holy Spirit in 1 Thessalonians chapter 5. He says to the brethren at Thessalonica, this again is 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verse 1, do you, now as to the times and the epochs, the same phrase used in, I think, in Acts 1, now as to the times and seasons or epochs, brethren, you have no need of anything to be written to you. So they clearly understood, at least by the time Thessalonians was written, which the letters to the Thessalonians were only, what, 13 years or so, maybe, after the ascension of Christ. So this was not a great time period that had passed. And at the very least, their understanding, well, I think they understood it. I think they understood it pretty clear. So
after Acts chapter 2, and the
before
apostles
Acts
preaching
chapter
by
2.
the inspiration of the Holy Spirit.
Yeah,
right?
I think they understood it beforehand. Jesus asked them, do you understand? I'm going to accept their answer and Jesus' acceptance of their answer. I'm going to go with that above anything else. That's my take on it.
Okay, well, I would, argue that, but go
I kind of
ahead.
figured that. Okay. So here they are, their understanding. But the word parousia, have you ever done a word study on parousia of Christ? Okay, so we know Paul had a parousia. He had a coming and so forth. We know royalty had parousia. They would come and go. Okay, we get that. Kings and so forth. But whenever the term, what was that?
The bride or the
bridegroom
would have his parousia.
Yeah, there would be a parousia during the wedding, Jewish wedding ritual. But the parousia of Christ, they use this very specific term in Matthew 24, verse 3. So when you consider the term that's being used, it's essentially that uses the definite article, parousia of you. All right? So if I'm remembering this correct. So every time this idea of the parousia of Jesus is used, it's always in reference to his second coming, so to speak, terms that we use. But his technical parousia, when we use that term, parousia, there is no question, parousia of Jesus, there is no question, beyond doubt, there's no question that it's always referring to this second coming. Hebrews chapter 9, verse 28. You got the first one for him to deal with sin, and then when he appears the second time, it's for salvation. So there's never a time where there's a third or fourth or fifth or sixth parousia. Only that second coming, that coming that they asked about, or that parousia or parousia in Matthew 24. As a matter of fact, in Matthew 24, it's used, what, 4 times? So yeah. So
24 verse 3, 24 verse 27, 24 verse 37, 24 verse 39.
Yeah. So while we're there, I guess we could ask the question, if verse 36 is a transition verse, why is he continuing to talk about his parousia?
Okay. Do you see verse 36, right?
Yeah. But of that day and hour.
First word of verse 36 is what?
But.
No, it's not what. What is the first word of verse 36?
But. Yeah, I said but. It just didn't come out clear, I guess.
Okay. All right. I thought you said what.
Yeah. No. It's but.
So
day.
Verse 36,
Greek word day.
He says, but of that day and hour, no one knows. So the word but is a contrasting conjunction.
Okay.
Correct?
No.
The word but is a contrasting conjunction, right?
No. And
Is that correct?
No.
Isn't that correct?
No.
No.
That the word but is
No.
a contrasting conjunction?
No, it's not. Let me ask you this.
The word but is not a contrasting conjunction?
Let's do it this way. Let's do it this way.
Did you answer or not?
Well, let's do it this way. So neither one of us gets our thought broken up. Go ahead and say what you're going to say, and then let me say what I'm going to say. That way, we get to flow. Either
So
one
I
of us.
asked the
Okay.
question.
Yeah.
Is the word but, B-U-T, is the word but a contrasting conjunction
No.
that sets forth a contrast between what comes before it and what comes after it?
No. No. And I would go as far as to
It
say
is
that you
not?
don't believe that either. You say it, but I'm going to say you probably don't believe it.
So you said no?
No.
That's true. He said no.
That is true. That is correct. I said N-O. No.
Okay, so the word but is not a contrasting conjunction.
That is correct.
That
I
is
just want to
absolutely
make
correct.
sure.
Now, I might
So-
qualify that to say not always. In English, it kind of is always, but not
And
here.
in Greek.
Yeah.
Okay. Hang on just a second.
All right.
Let me look. Let's see. It is a logical, connective, coordinating conjunction. Coordinating conjunction. But on the other hand, that's the syntactical definition of the translators or of the people who write the Greek dictionaries. That they define the word but there as a contrasting conjunction. The definition is given, but, and also, right, this is also part of the definition, the way the word is being used here in the Greek, on the other hand. So wouldn't on the other hand be a contrast?
I'll let you do that.
So I'm not looking at just the general definition of the word but or day in Greek. I'm not looking at just the general definition of the word. I'm looking at the specific contextual syntactical definition of the word.
Got it.
In verse 36.
Got it.
Okay?
The very first word.
And it is given as on the other hand. That's a contrast.
By
So yes, the word but, the
Who
Greek
you-
word day, is being used as a contrasting conjunction in verse 36. In the Greek, not just in the English, in the Greek. It's being used as a contrasting conjunction.
who are you quoting, by the way? Just for clarification.
Well, I'm actually looking at a Greek. I'm looking at the Greek translation of Matthew chapter 24 and verse 36, and looking at the I went blank on the term I'm looking for. Well, I'm looking at it in the Greek and looking at the breakdown in the Greek. In I guess it would be a I can't remember the term for what it is now. Let me see if I can find it. Okay. Well, anyway, it's listed out here. Conjunction, logical conjunction, coordinating, continuative conjunction, and this is what you're asking me.
Okay.
The dictionary that
Go right
defines it according to the syntax that I'm looking at is the Greek English lexicon of the New Testament based on semantic. That's the word I was looking for.
All
I'm
right.
looking at a semantic breakdown of the passage. Okay. And it's, I don't, can you see it there on my screen? You know, the way it's broke down.
I don't have that. I don't have a way to have that up. I'm sorry.
Okay, so that's what I'm looking at. And in the Greek English lexicon of the New Testament based on semantic domains, that means in the context where the word is used, not just a general definition of the word, but in the specific context where it's used. That's what semantic domain is. It says that
I know it.
the word is being used here. This is specific from this. It's Loanita's semantic dictionary. Okay, a marker of contrast. But on the other hand, okay, so it's specific to the way it's being used in this specific passage.
Okay. I'm very familiar with that definition. I'm going to tell you I disagree
Okay.
with it. And I'm going to tell you that you disagree with it. And I'm going to tell you that the translators disagree with that. So, but I have to ask this question. So you're saying that every time the word but is used, it is transitive.
I never said that.
Well,
I'm
clarification.
I specifically said, in this context, in this domain where the word is used, it is being used as a contrast, a marker of contrast.
Okay. So, just verse 36.
I think one of the problems on your side is that you pick a word like Perusia and you say it always refers to the same thing.
Show me that it doesn't.
I don't have that problem.
It's used.
I look at the way the word is being used in the context and base it on the contextual use of the word.
Okay, so am I. The contextual use of parousia regarding the eschatological coming of Jesus Christ is always the same.
Talking about the word but.
Well, I was just clarifying my position on parousia or parousia, however. I don't know if I'll ever say
I
it
know
right.
your position.
Okay.
I know your position on the parousia.
Okay.
I know that you look at that and you say, because I've dealt with it before. You can go back and watch my videos. I've already dealt with that. That every time you see that word, you say it refers to the second coming of Christ.
No, it does.
No. You didn't say that.
Regarding Jesus and his parousia, it's always referring to second coming, quote unquote.
There's other parousia.
No, it doesn't.
Okay, so then are you willing to say, if that's the case, and then I want to make comment about verse 36. Are you willing to say, just give me a yes or no, that there's more than one parousia, more than one coming of Jesus Christ? You already answered this, by the way.
Different manners, yeah. I mean, he literally came to this earth the first time to be the sacrifice for our sins. He's going to literally come again a second time to end this dispensation that is referred to as the last days. That means there's nothing coming after it, because these are the last days, right? So there's nothing coming after it. He's going to literally come again when it's going to be ended, right? Now, the word parousia is used in reference to other things in a figurative way, just like it is used. If you go back and you look in the Greek Old Testament about the destruction of Babylon, for example, and God's destruction from the various kingdoms that it refers to there in the Old Testament, you see the same kind of language used, and it's being used. God did not literally come personally, as some of the Old Testament, especially minor prophets, put it, as a giant warrior striding across the earth, shooting fireballs out of his eyes. He didn't literally do that.
Okay, so we got it. Isaiah 19 says it
described in a figure
was his presence, that he
and
was
that's
present
how
at
he was
Egypt.
talking about the destruction of Jerusalem.
Okay, so let me say this real quick. In Acts chapter 23 and verse 11, and then I have to go back and correct your error on verse 36 in Matthew 24. But since we deviated here, okay, let's try to hold it to this. Is this a parousia, right, of the Lord? Acts chapter 23, verse 11. But on the night immediately following, this is after Paul just about got ripped to pieces when he stood up for the resurrection among the Sadducees and the Pharisees. This has started his descent to Rome and obviously his death. Okay, so, but on the night immediately following, the Lord stood at his side. Is that a parousia?
Acts chapter 23.
23, verse 11.
It doesn't use the word there, no.
So he was there. I think he was there literally.
You're asking me, is that a parousia?
Yeah.
What's your? Doesn't use the word. Why are you asking me to put words in the text that aren't there?
Because that's exactly what you did a minute ago. You put words into the text about parousia and the coming of Jesus that are not there. So I mean, we get accused of that, but you just did it. You did it big time.
Okay.
And you took all that road.
Tell me where I added words to the text.
What's that?
I didn't add any words to the text.
Yes, you did.
I gave the definition of the word.
If this is a parousia of Jesus, why did the Holy Spirit choose not to use that word? He chose to use the word that the Lord stood. Now look that word up. He was there beside Paul. And I think that this happened many times. So is this his second coming? And then the destruction of Jerusalem would have been his third. And then there's going to be a fourth one based on the paradigm that you and many of our brethren share.
You want to make it literal every time. Every time you see the word, you want to make it a literal coming of the Lord.
Yeah, usually we're accused of spiritualizing everything.
If God could destroy kingdoms in the Old Testament without literally coming to destroy those kingdoms, even though it said he was going to come and destroy those kingdoms, well then, why can't Jesus be talking about the same thing with the destruction of Jerusalem? Using the exact same language that is used in those Old Testament passages.
Because Jesus said...
So in the Old Testament, you recognize that it's not speaking literally, that God is going to literally come and do those things to those kingdoms, but it's figurative language used in reference to judgment.
He
but
did literally
the exact same language in the New Testament in Matthew chapter 24. You say, well, that's literal. That's his second coming. That's his literal second coming.
There's no reason to get upset. We're just trying to figure this out. So let me illustrate to you that not even you believe what you said about Matthew 24 and verse 36, which is tied into what we were just talking about. Okay.
Okay.
So
yeah. Please explain to me what I believe.
You don't believe that. The scholars don't believe that but is transitive. You all are the ones picking and choosing about but. Which of the other 24 times that but is used in Matthew 24, in the Olivet Discourse, actually, 24 times day is used. Which ones are transitive and which ones are conjunctive? Which ones?
Well, I'd have to go through and look at all of them.
Well, no, you're going to go through it and pick and choose.
Right now, I'm specifically looking at the one in verse 36.
Okay.
So, now if there was one universal application of that word, then we could do what you're talking about, but there's not.
But that's what you just tried to do, so which you accuse us of doing, right?
Looking at the word in verse 36 and the way it's used in verse 36. So I mean, if you really want to take the time to go through Matthew 24 and look at 20 times that the word is used in Matthew 24, we can. Where's the first time it's used?
Concerning, however, this is Greek Interlinear from BibleHub.com, right? Peri de tes or taste or whatever. Concerning, however,
where is it?
Matthew.
What verse are you looking at?
Verse 36. Concerning,
32?
however,
36.
The transition verse in question, which is not a transition.
Oh, okay. So you're sticking with verse 36. I thought you wanted to go and look at all the rest of the words, the way the word but is being used.
We don't have time.
In Matthew 24. But you're staying with verse 36.
I can just show you that here. If I can get a word in edgewise. Okay, so concerning, however, this is how the interlinear puts it, right? Concerning, peri de tes, taste, whatever, hemeris, and so on. Concerning, however, the day, that, and hour, no one knows. Okay, so I don't need to read the whole thing, I think, in the transliteration. But concerning, however, peri de. If you were to use that language, I mean, there's 2 or 3 arguments I'm going to use here, right? So this will be the first one. If you were to use that language, you would not be transitioning. It would not be transitive. If you use the exact same English words. Concerning, however, so, you were telling your wife about your trip at the grocery store when you got home.
Moreover.
And you would say, well, moreover, about that, or concerning, it would be conjunctive. Now,
that's not the way the word is being used there.
Well, sure it is. And I'm going to show you why. When you answer verse 35, what does verse 35 mean? Let's just go with what you say, and let's say...
Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will by no means pass away. But of that day, and there's the key, it's that day.
What day?
So up until verse 35, he's been talking about one day. And now in verse 36, he starts talking about a different day. You can't contrast the same day to itself.
So verse 35 is the destruction of Jerusalem.
Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will by no means pass away. Let's see, verse 32. Now learn this parable from the fig tree. When its branches are already become tender and put forth leaves, you know that summer is near. So you also, when you see all these things, that's the destruction of Jerusalem. Know that it is near, at the doors. Assuredly, I say to you, this generation will by no means pass away till all these things take place. That's the destruction of Jerusalem. Heaven and earth will pass away. So since he's using the same language, I would say yes, that's the destruction of Jerusalem. But my words will by no means pass away. Right? But of that day and hour. So he's been talking about one day, which is the destruction of Jerusalem. Now he's contrasting the destruction of Jerusalem to a different day.
What day is he referring to grammatically?
You can't contrast a day to itself. It has to be a different day. It can't be in verse 36 for that to be
I would kind of agree
a
with that.
contrasting conjunction. It has to be talking about a different day. Because up until verse 36, he had said, this is what to look for so that you know when the day of the destruction of Jerusalem is going to come. That's the day he's been talking about.
Thank you.
He told them what to look for, that they can see it coming, that
verse
they know
35.
and they can be prepared for it.
What is heaven and earth in verse 35?
To that, there's another day that no one knows the day nor the hour.
Hey, brother.
It can't be the same day.
Hey, Norm. What is verse 35? Heaven and earth.
Well, it's going along with that same back up to verse 30, I guess. Then the sign of the Son of Man will appear in heaven, and then all the tribes of the earth will mourn, and they will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven with power and great glory, and he will send his angels and the great sound of the trumpet, and they will gather together his elect from the four winds, from one end of heaven to the other. So it's that same figurative language of judgment on a nation that you find in many places.
Thank you.
And so heaven and earth there is being used figuratively for the destruction of Jerusalem.
Thank you.
Because heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will by no means pass away.
Thank you. Excellent. Excellent. Heaven and earth is not being used here literally.
Absolutely.
Are you willing to say that heaven and earth is not literal in 2 Peter 3? If it's not literal here?
No.
2 Peter 3 is the Olivet Discourse.
Two different contexts, two different audiences.
Really?
So why would I say it's the same thing?
Because
it's the same trend of language.
You believe in a third coming.
Kind of judgment language.
2 Peter 3 is a third coming.
Judgment.
2 Peter 3 is the third coming. Yes or no?
Pardon me?
2 Peter 3 is a third coming. Yes or no?
No.
Okay. 2 Peter 3 is the second coming, and the destruction of Jerusalem is the second coming, even though they use the same language?
No.
So which second?
The destruction of Jerusalem
is 1.5 coming?
The definite article, the second coming. No, it's not. It is figurative language used in reference to the destruction of a nation, like has been used many times all through the Bible, many times in the Old Testament. It used figuratively to refer to the destruction of a nation. It's the exact same language. So, no, it's
it
not
is the exact same language.
coming.
Look at Isaiah 34. The world's just totally burnt up in pitch and tar and fire, and then there's animals living. That's
Second Peter 3 definitely is judgment language, without a doubt. It is judgment language, but it's not the same judgment of Matthew 24.
It certainly is. The same
why would I have to
language.
Say that since Peter uses the same language as Matthew 24, and like you just said, Isaiah, why would I have to say that they're referring to the same judgment? Because they use the same. Well, is Matthew chapter 24 referring to the same judgment that Isaiah referred to when he used that language?
Now, wait a minute. Let's not. I want to prevent you from jumping from topic to topic.
Answer my question. Is Matthew 24?
You're jumping from topic to topic because when you get pinned down, you got to go to something else.
Yes or no? You ask me yes or no. I'm asking you yes or no. Same judgment, yes or no?
Okay. Here's what you did with Matthew 30, 24, 36.
Same judgment, yes or no?
I'm not even so sure of what you're asking. So let me say this, and then I
Is
promise we'll
is
move on
the
to that.
judgment language of Matthew 24, verse 35 and prior, is the judgment language there the same judgment that Isaiah referred to when he used the same judgment language? Are they the same judgment, yes or no? That's what you asked me with Matthew 24 and 2 Peter 3. So I'm asking you Matthew 24 and Isaiah.
Sometimes that language is used in reference to the destruction of Jerusalem in 70. Yes, all through the Old Testament. Sometimes it's used in reference to the destruction of Egypt or
judgment
whatever.
Isaiah referred to, using the same language. Is it the same judgment?
No.
I believe Isaiah
how far-
refers to the destruction of Babylon, wasn't it?
How far you want to go with
The
this?
contrast in it.
How much time you got?
The contrast between the two judgments.
Because I'm sorry.
The contrast between the two judgments is in Isaiah there was.
So see, you're wanting me to say that Matthew 24 is the same judgment as 2 Peter 3, even though it's different occasions, different audiences,
it's not.
different contexts. But you won't tell me if Matthew 24 is the same judgment as Isaiah was referring to when he used the same language.
Where at in Isaiah? Which one do you want to go to? 34?
It is different.
You're the one that quoted the passage from Isaiah.
Okay.
What passage from Isaiah did you quote?
Okay. Let me answer, because you're jumping around from topic to topic. And that happens when you get nervous and you're not sure what to say. So I get that. But
okay.
Let me say this in Matthew 24 and verse 36, right? This word is referring to verse 35. It's conjunctive. Grammatically, he is referring to verse 35. Heaven and earth will pass away. What day was he talking about of that day and hour? He was talking about what he had just said in the previous sentence. Otherwise, then you agree with C.S. Lewis, who said this is the most confusing and misleading and disturbing verse in the whole Bible, verse 34, because here Jesus says in 34, all of these events, his coming included 29 to 31, is going to happen in their generation. And then 14 words later, this is what Lewis says, even Jesus admits that nobody knows. So which one is it? Okay, he grammatically is talking about verse 35. Verse 35 is talking about heaven and earth. Heaven and earth being the old covenant system. And we could go through that till the cows come home. But let me answer your verse, Isaiah 34. So go over to Isaiah and 34 and let's look at this. So in Isaiah 34, verse 1, draw near, O nations, to hear and listen, O peoples. Let the earth and all it contains hear, and the world and all that springs from it. So here he's using this same language from Matthew 24 and verse 35, heaven and earth. And what is he doing? He's referring to it as these nations. Hear the word. What word? This is this old covenant. For the Lord's indignation is against all the nations, and his wrath is against their armies. And he has utterly destroyed them. He has given them over to slaughter. This is about Edom. Edom is God's enemies. I mean, how far do you want to go with this? The Lord has a day of vengeance in verse 8. That's the same language in Luke 21 and verse 22. A year of recompense. When was this year of recompense? Jesus said it would be at the destruction of Jerusalem in Luke chapter 21 and verse 22. Year of recompense for the cause of Zion. It's where's Zion? Joel talks about this clearly. It's what Peter made reference to. It's loose earth into brimstone. Its land becomes burning pitch. It will not be quenched night or day. Its smoke will go up forever. From generation to generation, it will be desolate. None will pass through it forever and ever. And then the next half talks about the very same thing that Revelation points out and Peter points out, that after this destruction, there will still be people alive. Paul talks about it. He says, we who are alive and remain until the coming of the Lord. Then there are going to be those who are alive afterwards. I mean, there's one thing right after the other that, and I'm not trying to bounce around. I'm just trying to give you this exegesis about these things. Matthew chapter 24 and verse 35 is the antecedent to verse 36. Plain and simple. The same word, parousia, is used twice So you're saying there's two parasias if the word's used 2 times before, and then 2 more parasias if it's used 2 times after?
2 different things, yeah. And I don't have a problem with that because I don't have to make the word mean the same thing every time I say it.
The Bible makes it. The Holy Spirit chose to make it the same thing. Hey, brother.
People on my live stream are commenting that you're not answering the question I asked.
Ask it pointedly, and I'll answer it, and they'll see if they say the same thing. I already answered it, but what it is they don't like the answer, so that's what they say.
Is every time you see that same judgment language that the stars fall from heaven, the moon is dark, and the sun is darkened, that says birth pangs and all that same language, is that always referring to the same judgment, or
No.
is it figuratively? Is it figurative judgment language that is applied to different judgments that you see all over the Bible?
Hey, Norm.
For example, in Isaiah 13, in reference to the destruction of Babylon, isn't that same language used in reference to Babylon's destruction?
Absolutely.
It's the same language. The difference.
It is.
Okay, so the difference. But
Hang
listen,
on,
My
Norm.
question was.
Hey,
listen.
Norm. You asked us a question. Let us answer it. Okay. Thank you, brother. Go ahead.
Listen.
I thought you did. I'm sorry. Okay,
No,
I thought you did.
Yeah. We're going to yield to Trent here.
The difference in this is in those instances in Isaiah. The difference is with the destruction of Jerusalem is it says in verse 31, 24:31, and he shall send his angels with a great sound of a trumpet, and they shall gather together his elect from the 4 winds, from one end of heaven to the other. Is that not 1 Thessalonians 4? That's the difference between the two. It's the same language of judgment, but it's a completely different type of judgment. This is an actual gathering really. He's sending his angels. It's all the second coming. Does that make sense? Or do you understand what I said?
Are you done?
Yeah.
Okay, so if you recognize, like you just did, that the same language is used in reference to different judgments. It's figurative language used in reference to judgment. And it says, it's the day of the Lord, that the Lord comes, that this judgment is at the hand of the Lord. So every time you see that, is that you're understanding that those are literal comings of the Lord? So that the Lord, every time it says that the Lord has come in judgment on a nation, that the Lord literally came
Let me answer.
and did that. So the Lord has come, how many times?
No,
so
listen.
Norm,
stop.
Norm, stop. Norm. Hey, brother.
Stop. Please stop.
Hey, Norm. Let us answer the question.
Please stop.
Let us answer the question.
The difference is. The difference is.
Like I said, it's your program, so you go ahead.
The difference.
Well, we appreciate you being good about it.
Okay, the difference.
It could be a whole lot worse.
Okay,
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
No, I'm trying to kind of diffuse here a little bit. You got it. You got this.
The difference in this and what makes it different, and so your audience can understand this. This is the gathering of the elect from the 4 corners of the winds, from every end of heaven to the other. Is that not 1 Thessalonians 4? Is it or not?
I'm sorry, were you asking me?
Yes. Yeah. Yes.
I thought y'all were talking amongst yourselves.
No.
Okay, well, John, I ask you.
Say it again.
Okay.
Matthew 24.
This is judgment language.
29 to 31.
I completely agree and understand that's judgment language in Isaiah. And it's talking about Egypt, talks about Tyre, talks about all these judgments happening that God came on a cloud. That is true. That is a figurative language. It's representative, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But the difference in Matthew 24 is this one fine point. They gather the elect. There's a harvest at that time of the elect.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. That there was not a harvest at that time in Isaiah against Egypt, against Babylon, against Tyre, and all these other nations. So that's the difference Matthew 24 clearly says this is the judgment of second coming of Christ. That's it. And so I asked you, is that the same?
You still haven't answered my question that I've asked numerous times.
I answered your question.
Hey,
you don't
hey.
like the answer.
Okay, so Norm, this is what I've noticed you do in your videos. When you don't have an answer, you say, well, they didn't answer it. Okay, let me answer this. I'll try it again, and let's see we'll see what you say after this. Ready? Isaiah chapter 13, okay. Right? The oracle, Isaiah 13. Okay, Isaiah 13, right. 1. We're just going to study Isaiah here for the next hour, right? Just kidding. The oracle concerning Babylon, which Isaiah the son of Amos saw. Okay, so who's this referring to? It's talking about Babylon. No, I get it. He says he's coming in verse 3 to execute my anger. The Lord is mustering his army for battle. The Lord and his instruments of indignation to destroy the whole land. Okay, and then he says, wail, for the day of the Lord is near. So here's some of these language. Destruction from the Almighty, verse 7, and the hands will fall limp and every man's heart will melt. Verse 8, behold, the day of the Lord is coming, cruel with fury and burning anger. He will exterminate its sinners from it. I'm just pointing out a few things here. He's going to punish the whole world, or the world, for its evil. I will make, verse 12, mortal man scarcer than pure gold. I will make the heavens tremble, and the earth will be shaken from its place at the fury of the Lord of hosts in the day of his burning anger. You and I both agree this is figurative language. Right?
Right, for the destruction of Jerusalem, for the destruction of Babylon.
Right, okay, so we have no disagreement there. This did not literally happen. Isaiah chapter 19. The oracle concerning Egypt. Behold, the Lord is riding on a swift cloud. Well, that sounds familiar, doesn't it? And riding on a swift cloud is about to come to Egypt. He's about to come to Egypt. Well, that sounds familiar. The idols of Egypt will tremble at his presence. Is that literal or figurative? Did Yahweh ride on a literal cloud and had his physical presence at Egypt?
It's that same figurative judgment language that is used in Matthew 24.
I agree. Okay, so you and I agree on this. He says he's going to incite Egyptians against Egyptians. Figurative language there, or, what is this? In that day, verse 16, Egyptians will become like women. They will tremble and be in dread because of the waving of the hand of the Lord of hosts. So anytime we see this, I'm sure you've studied this about the hand or the arm of the Lord. It's representative, could be of judgment or salvation kind of deal. And notice what it says. Verse 24, in that day, Israel will be a third party with Egypt and Assyria. Figurative language? Yes, I think you would agree with that, right?
Yeah, we agree.
In verse
right, it's figurative judgment language. That's what we've been talking about.
All right. So in chapter 20, it says that Sargon was the one that executed this judgment. Okay. What about this figurative language that we see in Isaiah 24, verse 5? The earth is polluted by its inhabitants. Verse 12, desolation is left in the city. Verse 18, it will be when he flees, the report of disaster will fall into the pit, and he who climbs out of the pit will be caught in the snare, for the windows above are opened, and the foundations of the earth shake, and the earth is broken asunder, and the earth is split through, the earth is shaken violently, the earth reels to and fro like a drunkard, and it totters like a shack, for its transgression is heavy upon it, and it will fall, never to rise again. So it will happen in that day that the Lord will punish the host of heaven on high, and the kings of the earth on earth, and they will be gathered together like prisoners in the dungeon, and will be confined in prison, and after many days they will be visited, is what it should be. Yours might say punished, but if you look at it, it's visited. The moon will be abashed, and the sun ashamed, for the Lord of hosts will reign on Mount Zion and in Jerusalem, and his glory will be before his elders. Literal or figurative?
Okay, so 20 minutes ago, you said you were going to answer my question.
I'm answering your question, although you don't like it that I can't do it in 6 sentences. This is called Bible study. It's what Paul warned Timothy about diligence.
You're reading several passages, like I said, there were.
Did you just see where this was going?
that use the same figurative judgment language for different judgments. You pointed out the judgment of Babylon. You pointed out the judgment of Egypt and Isaiah 24. And so,
what's Isaiah 24?
The answer to the question is yes. The Bible uses the same figurative judgment language to refer to different judgments, and in those, in the Greek, if you were looking at the Greek translations to the Hebrew, you would see the word parousia there for the Lord's coming in that judgment.
That doesn't mean it's used correctly.
Literal or figurative.
Yeah,
That doesn't mean
That
it's
was
used
the
correctly
question.
in the
Do
Greek.
you acknowledge that it is figurative judgment language and not a literal coming of the Lord?
It's figurative judgment language. But look at Isaiah 25. All right? Verse 1. O Lord, you're my God. I will exalt you. I will give thanks for your name, for you have worked wonders, plans formed long ago with perfect faithfulness. You have made a city into a heap. I think that's talking about Jerusalem, don't you? If that's not enough to convince you, he continues on, a fortified city into a ruin. Doesn't that sound like Jerusalem?
He does talk about the destruction of Jerusalem in Isaiah. That's true. I'm not
in chapter 25. I believe he
does. I have to go
does.
back and look at the specific context you're referring to.
There's no question about which city it is.
I mean, I don't deny that Isaiah does talk about the destruction of Jerusalem, as does Daniel, as does many of the prophets.
Okay, all right. So this figurative language is used to describe the destruction of Jerusalem.
For the destruction of Jerusalem, that they used for the destruction of Babylon and Egypt and various kingdoms.
You don't want me to answer this.
Edom, right? They used the same language for the destruction of Jerusalem that they used for those other kingdoms. So why then does the destruction of Jerusalem require that that's the second coming of the Lord?
Because it was prophesied. Hey, Norm, listen to this.
Because it said they were sending angels.
Yeah. Listen to this.
Gather the elect. That's a harvest.
That's
spoken
right.
of in Matthew 13.
No way around that one. Okay.
1 Thessalonians 4. 2 Peter 3.
The one there's no way around. And,
okay. Isaiah 25. We're still in verse 2. Let me read the whole verse. For you have made a city into a...
Give me the reference again. I didn't get the reference.
Okay, I'm sorry. Isaiah 25 and verse 2. He says,
I'm already in Isaiah 25. Go ahead.
Okay, you have made a city into a heap, a fortified city into a ruin. A place of strangers is a city no more. It will never be rebuilt.
Okay.
That's Jerusalem in 70.
Okay. I'll give it to you.
Okay.
That's Jerusalem. Like I said, I have to go and do a little, deeper study on it than just taking your word for it. But for the sake of this discussion, I'll give it to you. I don't have a problem with it.
Okay. Now let me illustrate to you these Hebrew writers in the first century, understanding the Old Covenant, understanding the law of Moses in great detail. In 2 Peter chapter 3, verse 1, it says, this is now, beloved, the second letter I am writing to you, in which I am stirring up your sincere mind by way of reminder that you should remember the words spoken beforehand by the holy prophets and the commandment of the Lord and Savior spoken by your apostles. So the holy prophets spoke in figurative language, as you have admitted. They spoke in figurative language regarding the destruction of Jerusalem. And Isaiah, by inspiration of the Spirit, in chapter 24 and 25 in the little apocalypse, 24 through 27, makes it very clear that this is the destruction of Jerusalem, using this figurative language. And Peter, being an apostle of Jesus and referring to what Jesus said in Matthew chapter 24, using the exact same language in Matthew 24 as was used in Isaiah and other places, Peter uses the exact same language in 2 Peter chapter 3 in regards to what? The end of time? Nope. The end of the Old Covenant.
The end of the Christian dispensation, yeah.
The end of the Old Covenant. He says it twice in 2 Peter 3.
The end of the Old Covenant.
See, this was the question. Why will you acknowledge that
Let's get there.
the
Let's go. I gotta go.
same figurative language is used for different judgments, yet you say that 2 Peter 3 has to be the same thing as Matthew 24?
Because Peter said it was. That's why.
What's your reason for that?
Peter said it was.
It's not the same context.
Twice.
It's not the
Peter
same
said that
audience.
it was the same language
It's
twice.
It's not the same setting. So why does it? What requires that he's talking about the destruction of Jerusalem here?
Brother, God love your soul, and I do too. But what you have done is you did exactly what you accused me of doing, is going to a text with your paradigm and making your paradigm fit into the text. That's all you've done here.
No, that's not true.
I make the charge
That's not
that you
true.
have.
I'm asking a question, and if you can show me, then I'll say okay. What is it about the completely different setting of 2 Peter 3 that would necessitate that he's referring to the same thing as Matthew 24, when you've already acknowledged that the exact same language is used in reference to other things that aren't the same thing as Matthew 24? So what is it about 2 Peter 3 that would necessitate it to be the same thing?
Okay, let me say this one more time. Because Peter said twice in both letters, okay? One time in the first one, one time in the second one. If you understand what I'm saying, go back and read the prophets. I'm going to be using some language that you should understand. Matter of fact, in 1 Peter chapter 1, do you realize that Peter said that here in verse 10, as to this salvation, the prophets who prophesied of the grace of the grace that would come to you made careful searches and inquiries, seeking to know what person or time the Spirit of Christ within them was indicating as he predicted the sufferings of Christ and the glories to follow. Jesus come in glory, right? So, verse 12, it was revealed to them that they were not serving themselves, but you. Peter places the fulfillment of these prophecies squarely in their lifetime. Just as Jesus said squarely that these things would happen within this generation. Just as Jesus said squarely in Matthew 16, verse 28, there are some standing here who will not die until they see the kingdom of heaven. As Jesus said squarely in Matthew chapter 10, that you will not finish going through the cities of Israel until the Son of Man comes. That is harmonious. Now, I know you don't like that, but that's harmonious.
I mean, you just jumped around to a lot of different places. So
it's called exegesis,
where are you
brother.
making the connection that 2 Peter chapter 3 is the same setting as Matthew 24?
Absolutely.
I missed that.
It's the same. It's the same.
Okay.
It's the same language. And Peter uses the word stoichion.
Right? You're referring to 2 Peter 3 too?
2 Peter 3.
That you may be mindful of the words which were spoken before by the holy prophets, and of the commandments of us, the apostles of the Lord, knowing this first, that scoffers come in the last days, walking according to their own lust, and saying, where is the promise of his coming? Is that what you're talking about?
Absolutely.
So
this is the Olivet Discourse.
Are you talking about Matthew 24?
2 Peter 3, let me say this clear. 2 Peter 3 is the Olivet Discourse.
Is what?
2 Peter 3.
I didn't hear what you said.
I'm sorry. 2 Peter 3 is the Olivet Discourse.
I'm sorry. Hang on. Let me get the phone closer to my ear.
Okay.
I can't make out what you're saying. 2 Peter 3 is what?
The Olivet Discourse.
The Olivet Discourse. Oh, the Olivet Discourse. Okay.
Yeah, Olivet.
2 Peter 3 is the Olivet Discourse.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Not Olivet. Sorry about that.
Olivet Discourse. And why do you say that?
It uses the same language. It talks about the same theme. And it says that this is what Jesus spoke of.
So is Isaiah talking about the Olivet Discourse when he's talking about the destruction of Babylon?
You better believe it.
Isaiah?
You better believe it. Jesus is
we've already established that it's figurative language referring to judgment that is used for different judgments. So, you're running around in a circle.
No, I'm not. You're the one running around, brother.
On the one hand, you're admitting that the same figurative language is used for different judgments, but then you're saying because Peter uses the same language as Matthew 24, it has to be the same event.
No.
Okay, well, you're contradicting yourself.
I am saying that it has to be the same event. It uses the same language. It uses the language that Jesus said, go back and read
So
Daniel.
does the destruction of Babylon. That's what we keep going back to. Every time you say it uses
Thank
the
you.
same
You just made the
language,
point.
I'm going to say, so does Isaiah 13. And what next?
It's the same language that Jesus used in Matthew
So
chapter
does Isaiah
24.
13.
It's the same. Jesus used the language of the prophets as guided by the Holy Spirit in Matthew chapter 24.
So did Peter.
So did Peter.
Okay.
Same event.
Okay, let me try to explain it.
And you never dealt with stoichion in 2 Peter 3.
I mean, I don't understand how you don't see what you're doing.
Well, I kind of feel the same way. How about you?
You just admitted that.
Hey, but bring it down. No need to get upset.
The Old Testament prophets used the exact
Norm,
same language.
Norm,
for
put on the brakes, brother.
judgment on
Pull your
different
collar
nations,
open.
not just Jerusalem.
Norm,
And
bring
then
it
you
down.
say, well, Peter's using the same language that Jesus used, so he has to be talking about the destruction of Jerusalem.
there's
So
no need to get mad.
How do you not see that that's a contradiction?
There's no need to get mad unless.
I'm not getting mad. I'm just.
Well,
I mean, I'm certainly not angry. I just don't understand how.
Thank you. Much better.
You cannot see that you're contradicting yourself. I'm not angry.
I feel the same way. How you, Norm? I've got the same question, and it's the same question I asked myself. Why didn't I see this? Well, I'll tell you why. It's because, just like you, I let men tell me what to believe. And when I started letting the Holy Spirit guide this through his word and take Jesus at his word, then it became clear. And that's what you have to do. You have to drop that respect that we have for all these scholars and these men, and let the scriptures teach us, let Jesus teach us, and let the apostles teach us. And then, and only then, will we see the truth. And it's no different than with baptism or the acts of worship or whatever. It's the same process. So I hate to say this.
Well, let me just tell you, and I understand. I mean, it's the same thing that we tell people in denominations all the time, that you have to look at the text without any preconceived notions. Just look at the text for what it teaches, not to try to get it to agree with what you already believe.
Amen.
That's the same thing we tell people all the time.
Amen.
So I agree 100%. So instead of quibbling about these verses that we very obviously see differently, like I said, it boggles my mind how you don't see that you're contradicting yourself when you say in the same breath that yes, that same exact language is used for different judgments, but Peter has to be talking about the same judgment as Matthew 24 because he uses the same language. Okay.
Peter said he was referring to what Jesus said.
Obviously, we're not going to agree on that. So let me tell you why I cannot accept your position that the second coming of Christ has already happened.
Go right ahead, but let me say this real quick. We're way over, so try to abbreviate it some so we can wrap this up here in about 10 minutes. Because I have something I want to say too.
I have been asking for a direct answer to this question repeatedly, and the answers that I've gotten, or the supposed answers that I've gotten, just make a laughable mess out of the text. Okay, and this is what I said on my channel. Okay, and I'll say the same thing here, and maybe we can continue this dialogue. I don't know. But okay. I want to ask one question. And when you can satisfy that question, I'll move on to another question. Well, so far, this question has not been satisfied because Brent even admitted that, the answer to the question that was originally given didn't fit the context of the passage. In Luke chapter 20 and beginning verse 27, where the Sadducees come to Jesus and they think that they have Jesus in a logical contradiction, with his teaching on the resurrection of the dead because of the Mosaic law of the Levirate marriage. Okay, so
I'm
they
very
present
familiar with
Jesus
this.
with this scenario of the Levirate marriage to contradict the teaching of the resurrection. Okay, if we're supposed to follow the Levirate marriage, and I'm giving the gist of the text. Okay,
I got it.
if we're supposed to follow the Levirate marriage, then this woman who was married to 7 brothers, and they all 8 are dead. Okay, they're all, we agree with that. In the scenario, the Sadducees present to Jesus, all 8 people in the scenario are dead, literally
Got it.
dead and buried.
Literally
in the grave,
dead.
right?
Gotcha. Yeah.
Yes or no?
Yes.
Yeah, we got you. Yeah.
Okay. So, in Jesus' answer to that question, that they say, therefore, in the resurrection, whose wife does she become? Now, we agree that in the scenario they presented, all 8 people are
Dead.
dead.
Dead. D-E-D.
D-E-D, dead.
Dead.
Right?
Right.
Dead all over the Red Rover.
And so,
Just as God said, their body had
I
returned
know
to
how
the
to spell
dust.
dead. It's a joke.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay? So it says, for all 7 had her as wife. Jesus answered and said to them, the sons of this age marry and are given in marriage, but those who are counted worthy to attain to that age and the resurrection from the dead neither marry nor are given in marriage, nor can they die any more, for they are equal to the angels and are sons of God, being sons of the resurrection. But even Moses showed in the burning bush passage that the dead are raised when he called the Lord the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. For he is not the God of the dead, but of the living, for all live to him. Okay, now here's my question. If the second coming of Christ has already happened, then why do people still get married?
Number one, this is talking about in the resurrection, those who are resurrected. That's what they try. The confusion, what they try to
I'm
trap.
sorry, you're very muffled.
I had the phone covered up. I'm sorry.
Okay, so here's the issue. The whole point of this is that they denied the resurrection. So they try to trap
The
him.
resurrection of the dead.
Right. So they
denied the resurrection of the dead.
right. The Sadducees deny a resurrection. So they used
Of the dead.
yes. So they used that to try to trap him, saying, well, if there's a resurrection, doesn't the Levite marriage still apply to them in heaven? He says when they're able to, it's not only were they were going to be able to obtain that age, they were going to obtain that resurrection. And they were going to be as angels in heaven because they're in heaven. So it's talking about basically in the resurrection from the Hadean realm to heaven, are there going to be marriage? Whose wife is she in heaven? Is what they're asking him.
Well, they're asking about the resurrection of the dead. So, yeah, I guess you could say that. Yeah.
Okay, so that's the
so
answer.
whose wife will she be in heaven? Okay, go ahead.
Right. So that's it. And then he goes on. He talks about. Then he addresses their false idea about resurrection.
Which was what?
That there was no resurrection.
We don't know.
Well, it says that there's no.
That was their false idea. That there was no that they denied the resurrection.
That's what it says that's what it says in the Bible.
So do you or do you not? I mean, maybe I misunderstand what you teach, because it was my understanding that you teach that Jesus has already come, the second coming has already happened, and the resurrection from the dead has already happened.
Yes.
Right? We're not looking forward to a future resurrection of the dead. That has already happened, correct?
Okay.
Not a physical resurrection.
No. So go ahead. Go on. Make your point.
No, I asked the question: has the resurrection of the dead already happened? Yes or no?
No.
Okay, so
No, wait a minute. Wait. No, technically, because the way you phrase the question is incorrect.
Okay, well then, okay, now hold on. You said no, the resurrection of the dead has not already happened. Therefore,
And now wait a minute,
No.
Norm, you have to stop.
Okay.
Don't take a soundbite.
You are not a full preterist.
No. Listen.
Don't take a soundbite.
He said of the dead. It says from the dead. There's a big difference
Okay.
between of and from.
Okay, so the way you phrase the question.
If the resurrection of the dead hasn't already happened,
Resurrection
everything has to be from the
Norm,
dead, and
you're
full
doing it
preterism
again.
is false doctrine.
from the dead, not of the dead.
Okay, Norm, let me answer this because I don't want you putting words in my mouth and certainly interpreting my beliefs. Okay, the resurrection.
Like you were doing to me earlier,
Um,
telling me what I believe.
I was illustrating the errancy, your errant
Okay,
belief.
let's go.
Okay, so for time's sake, okay, it took you 4 minutes to ask that question. So don't expect me to answer it in 4 minutes. It's not that way. It doesn't work that way. But I'll be as brief as I can. You said
It shouldn't take 2.5 hours, right?
no, it doesn't have to.
You're a good sport.
Yeah, and we appreciate this. You've been good about this. Pretty much good about it. Okay, so the question that you ask it is, has the resurrection from the dead taken place? And I said no. You phrased the question in an unscriptural way. In 1 Corinthians chapter 15, the term is nekron.
Wait. Okay, hang on right there for just a second.
All right.
Can I go?
My phrasing of the
Yeah, if you
question
need
is
to
an
go.
unscriptural question.
Yes, it is.
Well, let me just make sure that I understand right, because
Uh-huh.
Jesus said in verse 37, but even Moses showed in the burning bush passage that the dead are raised. He says, let's see. He says in verse 35, but those who are counted worthy to attain that age and the resurrection from the dead. So, did Jesus phrase it unscripturally?
No, but you did.
Oh, I said the resurrection from the dead. The same thing he said.
All right. That's.
Has the resurrection from the dead already happened?
I'm-
Yes or no? And you said no.
I'm
Therefore,
trying.
there is a future hope of the resurrection of the dead. Therefore, full preterism is false.
I'm trying to answer that question. You're not using
Okay,
biblical
go ahead.
terminology. 1 Corinthians chapter 15 uses the term eknekron. That means from the dead ones, out of the deads, plural. Okay, so Jesus was the first fruits. Do you understand what the first fruits are of the dead?
Yes,
What?
right.
You got 30 seconds to explain
what?
it. It should be easy. What
You're
are?
asking me what first fruits are?
I'm asking you what
First fruit
Jesus.
is the first of more to come.
No, that's incorrect. Jesus was
That
the
means first fruit. First fruit does not mean the first of more to come.
not the way you're meaning it, and not that simplistic. You're leaving out the
Okay,
biggest
all right,
factor.
Go ahead and explain to me how I mean it.
No, I can't do that because that's up to you. But I can tell you
Well,
what
how
this.
do you know that I mean it in a wrong way? You just
Well,
said not in the way that I mean it, but then you said that you don't know how I mean it. So how am I not meaning it in the right way?
because I heard how you
don't
said
know
it.
how I mean it. Okay, go ahead.
This can take forever if you keep interrupting me. Jesus.
All right, go ahead.
Jesus said the first fruits. This is Leviticus chapter 23, and among others, about the 7 feasts of Yahweh. So Jesus was that first fruits, that wave offering that was taken first out of the ground when they entered the promised land. And so Jesus is that first fruits. 1 Corinthians chapter 15 teaches that Jesus is the first fruits, then those who are at his coming. So the second first fruits offering was that which was made with leaven. In other words, in order to symbolize the sinful nature of man. Everyone understands that about leaven. So that second first fruits was man being resurrected. Okay, so Jesus was the first to come out of the Hadean realm, not out of the dirt. The dirt was a sign, not the resurrection. There were 7 people before Jesus were resurrected in the scriptures, or maybe 6, and he was the 7th. But so the scriptures teach there were other resurrections before Jesus. So what made his resurrection the big thing? It was because he defeated the Hadean realm. He was able to break the grip of Hades, which we were reading about in Isaiah 24 and 25. So Isaiah 53 teaches the same concept, and so on and so forth. So that was the first resurrection. Jesus was the first fruits. I didn't mean to say the first resurrection. Jesus is the first fruits. Sorry, I got to reset that camera. Sometimes it does that. So Jesus was the first fruits. Then those who are at his coming were the second fruits. And this is all based on those 7 feasts of Yahweh, which there's not enough time to go into these things. So that resurrection, and here's how I would answer your question about the marriage. The same way that Jesus answered the question about the Sadducees that did not understand resurrection. And you don't understand resurrection. I did not understand resurrection. I thought it was something physical. But Jesus said to them, Matthew chapter 22, this is the parallel verse. He says to them that, verse 29, you are mistaken, not understanding the scriptures nor the power of God. So they didn't understand. Everything that they were saying about resurrection was incorrect. We go to Acts 23, and it's very clear they didn't believe in angels or anything else.
Their misunderstanding was that there was no resurrection, not what the resurrection was.
It's my
right? It's my contention that the resurrection they denied was a misunderstanding of what the resurrection was.
They didn't understand resurrection. Whatever that means, Jesus said it. You don't understand. My contention is that they totally missed the point of the resurrection. So, I'm not even going to engage in conjecture over what they believe, because I don't know. Ancient scholars don't know. How do I know? All I know is Jesus said that you don't understand. Now, I've read lots of opinions on it.
Some of them understand the power of God. You don't understand the scriptures of the power of God.
What was the context?
So it was about what they didn't understand.
It was about resurrection. So for us to inject any belief that they had on resurrection, other than what we can read, and you're not going to be able to explain it. How would they not believe in angels? When the Old Testament clearly talks about angels.
So the resurrection that they did not believe was a spiritual resurrection. What was a spiritual event? Right? They didn't understand that because they didn't believe in the Spirit. They didn't believe in angels. They didn't believe in spiritual beings. Yet in 1 Corinthians chapter 15, Paul said that we're raised to a spiritual body.
Now, wait a minute. See, here you go again. You're not letting me answer this question.
I thought you were done. Okay.
No, and we're so over time. This has just gone on so long. But it's not the first time. Often when we get into these discussions, it's 3 or 4 hours. Usually across the table, where we can take a break or something. But the idea here is that they didn't really know. We don't know exactly what they believed, other than whatever they believed was totally wrong. And Jesus told them that. So there are points that Jesus made to them to teach them the truth. These points being that, one, in the resurrection, they're all angels. There's nothing physical there. In the resurrection, they are not married because there's nothing physical. An angel, is it male or female? Well, neither.
Exactly right.
Neither.
Amen.
So
exactly right.
Yeah. Okay. So you agree with me on that? Then he says they are sons of the age to come. Well, in the age that they were living under, you're trapped in the Hadean realm. In the age to come, the Hadean realm is destroyed. That's just a point to make, which has already been destroyed. And when we die, we, for lack of a better term, go directly to heaven. The fourth thing is they cannot die anymore. Can't be a physical resurrection. If you're physically resurrected out of the ground, you have to die again.
Well, see, you keep using the term physical resurrection.
Do you believe?
And I have used that term mistakenly, I'll say, to contract, because if you look at like Romans chapter 6, verse 3 and 4, the figure of the resurrection is used there for our spiritual rebirth as Christians, right? Mm-hmm. So, sometimes it's a poor use of words. You contrast physical to spiritual in that sense. But Paul said in 1 Corinthians chapter 15 that the physical body goes into the ground, and what comes out, or what is resurrected. And I don't believe that it's a literal, coming up of the bones and everything out of the ground.
I'm glad you don't believe that, because that is correct. Your timing is just off.
But he says that the physical body is what goes into the ground, and what comes out of the ground, or what is resurrected, what comes back from the dead, is given a spiritual body that will be eternal in the heavens with the Father, or with God. And so I understand that sometimes there's a poor use of language there in contrasting the spiritual new birth.
There's hope for you.
As a resurrection. The first resurrection, right, is how it's said in Revelation, has no fear of the second death. Well, first resurrection would imply a second resurrection.
No, right? That language there does not imply. It's a great resurrection.
Why would you say first resurrection if it was the only resurrection?
English language.
You wouldn't say it that way.
English language,
right?
mistranslation.
Neither would you say second death if there wasn't a first death.
English translation, mistranslation. Look up the word. I don't remember what it is in the Greek, and I don't want to get into that because we're wearing everybody out. But the first resurrection is the great resurrection.
It's a really simple answer to my question without, we're bouncing to Revelation.
I just told you
Acts 23 and all these things. But it's a simple question. If the resurrection from the dead has already happened, and Jesus said that there would be no marrying or getting in marriage in the resurrection, then why are people still getting married?
You think very physically. The resurrection was taking place as Paul wrote those words. I'm sorry, as Jesus, not at this point. It wasn't taking place because Jesus was talking in that age. But as Paul wrote 1 Corinthians 15, the resurrection was underway. Jesus had defeated the grave as evidenced by his physical resurrection. And the second first fruits was on their way at his coming. That's why there's no salvation until Jesus comes. Hebrews 9:28. Also the redemption, Luke chapter 21, verse 30 or something like that. So the point of it is they were commanded to get married. 1 Corinthians chapter 7, while the resurrection was underway, they were commanded to have wives, right? Elders were supposed to have wives. Deacons were supposed to have wives. The resurrection was underway in the first century.
There you go again, making it all the same thing.
Because it is.
Every time you see the term resurrection, it's referring to
AD 70.
New birth. It's referring to being converted to Christ.
It's one of two things. It's a Romans 6 deal, or it's the resurrection that occurred at AD 70 according to Daniel chapter 12. Daniel makes it crystal clear when the resurrection would take place, as does Jesus and Peter. Jesus uses the same language and talks about the same thing in Matthew 24, 29 to 31 about the gathering. That's 1 Thessalonians 4. That's resurrection. Certainly you wouldn't deny that, would you?
Okay, so again, if the resurrection has already taken place, why do people still get married?
Because physical people marry. People who are dead, who have no gender, no sex, they don't marry. They're like angels. Jesus made that very clear. That's why he said, and you're in the same position that the Sadducees were, you don't understand the scriptures regarding resurrection. So that's why you can't get this. And that's why you keep saying, well, you're not answering the question. I am answering the question. Jesus answered the question. You just don't like my answer or his.
No, Jesus very plainly said, very clearly said, but those who are counted worthy to attain that age and the resurrection from the dead neither marry nor are given in marriage.
Resurrection,
so the resurrection of the dead
ones
is referring to either the new birth in the church or the destruction of Jerusalem, which is also history. If you apply either one of those. then the question remains: why are people still getting married?
First off, you can't be resurrected, at least today, without being resurrected. That didn't make a lot of sense. In the first century, as you admitted in the transition period, you would not be resurrected to life if you weren't resurrected to life physically. You could not be resurrected spiritually out of the Hadean realm. That's the resurrection, is out of the Hadean realm into heaven, so to speak. So you're viewing it as a physical resurrection, or something that physically takes place.
I'm not. I'm not viewing it as a physical resurrection.
On the physical plane.
At what Jesus said.
On the physical
and
plane.
He said,
Norm, we got
the resurrection.
Norm.
There's neither marrying nor
you can say it 100 times, and it still makes no sense the way you present it.
Now, William Bell said that Jesus was saying that the Levite marriage would not be practiced in the New Covenant, which does not at all even come close.
That is true.
To giving the right understanding of this passage.
Do you understand
You're just not answering it at all.
Do you understand what seed promise is and the land promise and all that? That's why. That's why there's none of that taking place in a physical sense. We don't go through that.
So you are mentioning about the Levite marriage, and that Jesus is saying that in the New Covenant the Levite marriage wouldn't be practiced.
Jesus was talking about that. When people are resurrected out of the Hadean realm into heaven, there's no marriage because they're like the angels. That's what Jesus said.
I agree.
The resurrection has taken place.
That has already happened. Why do people still get married?
You're never going to get this until you open your eyes, brother. Because you don't like the answer, you keep saying that.
You're not satisfying what the passage says.
Neither are you.
I mean, you're
my friend.
And you can say it's my lack of understanding. I just can't see it, or whatever. But you're just not satisfying what the passage says. Jesus very clearly said.
Calm down.
That in the resurrection, there's neither marrying nor getting in marriage.
Because you don't understand resurrection correctly, you cannot understand what Jesus is saying. John chapter 5, verse 44 to 47. Because you don't understand, I'm going to pull one of your tactics. Because you do not understand resurrection correctly, you cannot understand what Jesus is saying. John chapter 5, verses 44 to 47. Because you do not understand resurrection correctly, you cannot understand what Jesus is saying. John chapter 5, verse 44 to 47. That's only 3 times. So here's what we have to do. We really do need to end this, probably for both of our sakes, and have pity on our audience. But I want to say that I'm thankful for your good attitude to come and do this, and I'd certainly be open to talk with you about this and sit and hash this out. I think maybe you're closer than you think to seeing the truth. You just need to understand audience relevance. You need to understand scriptures interpret scriptures, and time statements. When you get those things, it's going to plug in and you're going to go, now I see it. But until then, and you start trying to interpret things by modern paradigms and modern scholars and their understanding of things, and then you listen to your brethren and the preachers that preached to you from the time you were born, you're going to see it the way people see it today, not the way the brethren in Thessalonica saw it in the first century.
Let me ask you a question, and I appreciate all that. Okay. Let me ask you another question real quick.
Okay, we'll try.
In 1 Corinthians chapter 15,
all right,
where Paul's teaching about the resurrection of the dead.
Yeah.
Had Paul been resurrected at that time?
Spiritually, he was baptized, immersed. Romans 6, he makes it clear that's a resurrection. But it's not the resurrection out of the Hadean realm. That first or great resurrection you made mention of.
The resurrection of the dead.
Right. That was if he died.
Okay.
Now wait a minute. Let me answer.
So you're acknowledging that there's 2 different resurrections.
Your salvation, Romans 6. The resurrection of Daniel 12, 1 and 2 in the first century, as Jesus said in Matthew 24.
Okay, but the resurrection in Daniel chapter 12 is again figurative language, talking about the transition of dispensations.
No, it's not.
But
resurrection and judgment. when the power of the
So you
holy
acknowledge
people
that the
are
word
completely
resurrection
shattered.
is used in reference to different things. It's not always
Two
talking about
things.
the same thing.
There's two things. Two things that we're
Right?
concerned about. It's talking about salvation, and in an eschatological sense, it's talking about the resurrection that took place in 70 at the destruction of Jerusalem.
Okay. Let me ask it like this, and then we'll go.
All righty.
Let me ask it like this. The word resurrection
I'm going to answer it the
is
same
used
way.
in the Bible for different things. Yes or no?
Two things in an eschatological sense. The only way you could do it would be three other things, but in three ways. But how many times do you want me to answer this? See what it is, Norm. You don't like the answer.
I want you to say yes. I just want you to say yes.
Yes, and I'm telling you three different ways. But the
Okay,
resurrection that you're
that-
talking about
Yes is a direct
70.
answer to a yes or no question. So acknowledging that the word resurrection refers to different things, every time you try to apply it to the destruction of Jerusalem,
you're doing the very thing that you accuse us of. Dodge, duck, make multiple meanings, and when it suits you, and then you say it means the same thing when it suits you, brother. It's not a good thing.
So you don't think that the context determines how a word's being used?
Hey, amen, absolutely.
Okay, so the context of the word determines how the word's being used.
Yeah. What passage? Resurrection in 1 Corinthians 15 is the resurrection of 70.
Is the resurrection at the second coming of Christ?
Yes. In 70. As foretold by the prophets and Jesus.
So 1 Corinthians 15 is talking about so AD 70, the destruction of Jerusalem, it was a resurrection from the dead, and that's what Paul's talking about in 1 Corinthians 15.
Yeah. Yeah. The first part he talks about them being saved and obeying the gospel. So there's that resurrection from a baptism standpoint.
Right.
The context bears that out.
Which would be different than 1 Corinthians 15, right?
That is in 1 Corinthians 15. First, 6 verses or something like that. You realize he talks about soteriology in the first few verses of 1 Corinthians 15. So we preached and so you believed. What do you think he's talking about? I mean, he just lays it out.
I made known the gospel?
Yeah, verse 1. So I made known to you, brethren, the gospel which I preached to you, which also you received, and which also you stand. That is making reference to baptism, obviously. Romans 6. Galatians 3. Ephesians 2.
Okay. So 1 Corinthians 15, and all he teaches about the resurrection there in 1 Corinthians 15 is the same resurrection as Romans chapter 6, verses 3 and 4.
In verse 1, obviously, you're trying to impose on me your paradigm, and I don't believe like you do. The context
I'm just asking questions. I'm not trying to impose anything. I'm just asking questions.
The context determines what the resurrection is. Jesus being the first fruits is talking about a different resurrection than verse 1. Would you agree with that? I don't know why there's contention on that.
Jesus being the first fruits from the dead is referring to
Leviticus 23.
The final resurrection when we're all raised and go to heaven, and Jesus being the first fruit of that is the proof that that's going to happen.
Okay. He said, if you don't understand, I can't paint the picture in your head without you having an understanding of the 7 feasts of Yahweh. If you've never studied that, it's not going to make sense. The first fruits is not what you said. The first fruits is what Leviticus said and what Moses said and what Jesus talked about and what they practiced for 1,500 years every year during those feast days. And until that becomes evident, then you're not going to be able to see why Jesus did what he did and it had to be at these certain times. And why he talks about the harvest and the harvest at the end of the age. The harvest was when? It was the second half of the feasts that happened 50 days after the first 4. So you had 4 and then you had 3 and then 50 days in between of them, which is why Pentecost would come around. And so, I mean, that's what I'm saying, is there's not enough time to go through all of those feast days. But until you get that, you're not going to get it. You're going to keep looking at it from a physical 21st century paradigm, not a first century understanding of Hebrew terminology. I'm going to say we're going to have to end it here. And I want to say this, Norm. I count you as my brother. I love you. I love your soul. I wish no harm on you. And I pray that you'll be liberated by the truth of the whole truth, the gospel truth. And that's my wish for you. We need good men who are willing to stand up for the very words of Jesus and preach it, like you said, regardless of what other men believe. And I hope that you're willing to continue to do that and move on past the paradigms of men. So
okay, well, that's what I'm doing. I appreciate it.
Okay, yeah, I appreciate you, brother, and you have a good night. And I thank you for this. So you have a good night, and you give my warmest wishes to you and all that you love.
Okay, I appreciate it.
Okay, you have a good night.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye. Okay, everybody, thank you so much. I know this was a marathon, and I just want to say thank you for hanging in there. Maybe you can digest a lot of what was said as you go back and maybe watch this in increments, or if you want to have a binge night, there you go. There's 2.5 hours worth of study and back and forth, and he was good about it, and I'm thankful for that. I'm thankful that he was good about this. So we'll just we'll leave it at that, and we'll just let all this settle down, and hopefully you can mentally munch on this, spiritually digest it, and then put it into action. So we will see you next week. Same time, 8 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, right here. Tell everybody that you know to check this out. And we're going to talk, hopefully, about the debate that I had with George Parsley back on Saturday. So love everybody. Remember to study to show yourself approved unto the Lord, and we will see you next time.